new reality. For the same, I would like to welcome our moderator, Mr. Tushar Vyas, President, South Asia Group M, and also a part of our esteemed advisory board. Welcome, sir. And our other panelists, Mr. Shashank Srivastava, Executive Director, Marketing and Sales, Maruti Suzuki India. Welcome. Mr. Aditya Swami, Director, Google. Welcome, sir. And Mr. Siddharth Banerjee, Chief Revenue and Marketing Officer, Game 24/7. Welcome. Welcome to all our panelists. I would now request Tushar sir to please take over. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction, and I would like to thank panelists for taking out time in sort of today's busy scenario. And thank you all audiences. I'm also getting used to speaking to computers, so that's my new reality. So if there is any glitches, please forgive me. So today's topic is basically all about the new reality in a post-pandemic world, right? And often the term used for new reality is a new normal, and I sort of looked up that term, what exactly new normal means, and came across a detail that in a 2019, chief economist of Allianz has sort of coined the term, and it means basically previously unfamiliar situation that become a standard now. So it become a more usual now. But it goes on to say that it's not a flesh wound, but a cut to the bone. And I guess I found an interesting part of definition, that something which is very deep and permanent, right? It's not something which is transitionary. It's going to be there. And what we are going to look at is basically apply a brand and marketing lens to today's situation, and idea sort of understand from the practitioner in the next 30 to 40 minutes in terms of what's their view, what they see this, what's the implication on a new normal in a sort of marketing direction. And like any marketing, our story needs to start with the consumer, right? Basically, marketing is a derivative of consumer trend and how sort of brand custodians are sort of reacting to that. So we should start sort of our discussion with understanding what's the consumer trend and what's the implication. And maybe we look at it in a few areas. There are a few trends which got reverse, with what has been happening for maybe years or decades got reverse in last few quarters. There are a few things got accelerated, and there are also new customer habit got formed in the last few months, right? So there are changes happening at a various level. And I'm lucky to have a panel which is like in a way very strongly representing the full value chain. So we have got Aditya, who is sort of representing Google and expert in a platform, which has got a bird's eye view of what's happening at a consumer level. We have got Siddharth, who is deep into sort of content ecosystem, and also in a way manages the online brand. And we have Shashank representing the brand, right? So we have a very interesting and diverse view on this topic. Let me start with Aditya, and nobody knows better than Google at a broader level, right? So Aditya, over to you. What do you see as a sort of from a consumer trend perspective?
Thanks, Tushar, for setting this up. Maybe we just start a little bit about pre-COVID, right? I think with like 500 million people on the internet today, the internet has become a pipe that has really connected all parts of India. And I think, we used to always talk about India and Bharat, or India 1, India 2. I think the pipe has really shrunk that difference. And more we see people across different parts of the country behaving very similarly. And I think that's a stark change to what was happening earlier. And I'll give you a few examples, right? If education is, say, interesting, people in urban cities are trying to skill themselves up to make them more relevant for the workforce. But people in smaller towns are figuring on the internet to actually educate their children and give them a livelihood. So I think the pipe of the internet has really brought India together. And what we've seen on our platform, since you asked me about that specifically, Tushar, as this happened, as expected, you'd expect more people to be online and more people are going to consume YouTube. But I'll give you some interesting numbers, like connected TVs. People who actually got their TVs hooked up to the Wi-Fi in their homes have seen 100% jump pre-COVID. Now, to me, that would have typically taken maybe a couple of years to happen. It's happened in a few months. Search, for example, the actual number of search queries in a day today is now 1.2 billion. 1.2 billion queries in a day. And it's interesting that the queries are not just coming from metros and tier 1 towns, they're coming from smaller towns. They're coming in regional languages, so people are actually typing their own languages. They're coming in voice, and that's clearly how people are thinking about how they are, interfacing with the platform differently. In specifically in terms of trends, when you said wound or cut, I think the general perception, oh, it's a bad thing, right? I would say, like, of course, what's happening around from a social and from a health point of view is not a good thing at all. But is there an opportunity for us to think about this as for a lot of us to actually leapfrog into the next phase? And I'd like to think of consumer trends in three buckets. Uh, the first trend is like it's a spike and it's going to settle back down. So the first thing that happened, is everyone's trying to figure out cooking. Everybody's social media feeds are now filled with like food that they're cooking, right? You couldn't go out to eat. I think food is our biggest passion. But I think soon as things come back, people are still going to go out and eat, and eating is going to come. So I think that will settle back to some kind of a normal. So I think that's a spike. It's gone up, but it's going to come down. The second, I think something a step up. It was going to happen, but it's happening at a much faster rate. Think like online education, right? Think of online gym classes. I was talking to this lady who said, PureFit now gives me such a great workout experience. I don't think I'm ever going to go back to a gym. Why do I need to go back to a gym? Being able to, Byju's very interestingly has made a statement, right? In my classroom, no student is a backbencher. Like the ability to educate masses is now so powerful, right? I think that's the thing. And things that have really taken off. I mean, Sid, we can talk more. I think gaming is just going through the roof, right? And I think those numbers on gaming, Sid is best place to talk about. The other big thing that we've seen exploding is banking. My dad typically want to go to the bank and check his passbook every month. He wants to meet the bank manager, make sure his money is safe and come back. For the first 1 month, he was very uncomfortable using digital banking. Now he's become so used to it that he's not going to go back to a physical bank again. And I read a latest number that UPI transactions in July, all-time high was 290,000 crores. And it's only growing month on month. So I think some behaviors are never going to come back. And I think this opens up opportunities for all of us to think about if the consumer behavior is fundamentally changing, how do we pivot our businesses to basically maximize the opportunity that the situation has thrown up? I think that I would like to be an optimist and look at the positives that we can build off in this moment.
Yeah, just Sid, coming over to you, and what do you see in terms of a broader content, in terms of contour of changes, and specifically your insight of the gaming?
Thanks, Tushar. So I think like Addy kind of set up the context in terms of what's happening and looking at it from a larger consumer lens. I think it's become very imperative. It was always important, but especially in times like these, it's become imperative that all businesses ask themselves the question of what role do they actually play in consumers' lives, including in stressful situations like what the pandemic has brought about for millions of people across the globe. So I think that's the first part, which is an interrogation of what is the contribution that you really do to your consumers as a business. So that's one thing. The second is, and if you're clear, you have a better chance of surviving and thriving. The second thing is for businesses to understand which part of their business models have changed or need to change, and which part of their business models are perhaps competitive moats in times like these. So that's really the second part. And then the third part is that under times where people are mentally stressed, and at the end of the day, if people form the backbone of organizations, then what are you really doing to take care of your people? So that's at an uber level. Coming to the world of business and the way we see in the recent few months, the businesses that have the capability to be digitally marketed and digitally consumed are the businesses that have tailwinds under this rather challenging year of 2020. Some of those businesses Addy referred to already. But if you had to look at the top three, it would be OTT entertainment, edtech, education technology, and gaming. And I think coming to gaming, in India in the last few years, gaming has been on the rise with, as we all know, some of the contributory factors becoming favorable. More smartphones in the hand of people, data pricing becoming more affordable, and a greater menu of gaming options for consumers across the spectrum. Um, and it's been perhaps accelerated in the last couple of months where people have had the time on their digital devices to actually consume gaming as a form of entertainment because now they could not step out in the lockdown induced times that they had. So we believe, and if you look at some of the external industry reports, an industry which is about $1 billion accelerating to a $5 billion industry in the next 3 years. But I think what is very interesting is, and Adi referred to it when he said that a lot of consumer behaviors are converging. And if you look around in your own homes, you'll see people now getting connected with gaming the same way that they perhaps used to get connected by a popular soap opera series in the past, or perhaps a Netflix series that people watch and talk about. So, gaming is also becoming a way to connect people, to connect friends, to connect families. And I think that is very interesting. Goes back to the original question which I raised of what is the role that your business is playing in consumers' lives, especially in trying circumstances like this.
Thanks, Said. And Shashank, your take, and especially you manage a brand which has also got a physical presence, and if you sort of highlight how you see these trends.
Yeah, so I will just give you some examples from specifically the auto industry and how I think it's also part of the general trend of consumer behavior. For example, clearly we see what we call the conspicuous consumption becoming now conscious consumption, which means the people are attaching greater importance to utility, to functionality, maybe more value conscious. Probably it's got something to do with the stressed conditions, not only in the economy, but also in terms of the social life itself. So I think people have become a little more conscious of that. And therefore, that is also reflected, for example, in automobile, where we see a greater demand towards the lower end of the spectrum in the portfolio. Also, we see first-time buyers going up. It's gone up in the last quarter from 43 to 47%. We see a lot of additional car buying because I think one of the major trends which we see is a greater health consciousness. And therefore, like Eddie was saying, some categories of products might have actually benefited, healthcare being one of them. So health, we find, for example, in case of automobile, the people are now moving away from shared mobility to owning personal cars themselves. So that shared mobility has actually taken a hit, and that's going to be a positive for some class of OEMs. Second, I think Sid I think pointed that out. People are also looking at societal impact, which is how real and meaningful the products or brands are in their consumption. So it is now they are more socially conscious, not just economically conscious, but also socially conscious. And I think that's a major impact that's going to have, especially for cars, for example, in terms of environment or in terms of emission. People would want brands to be also adding value to the society as such in a more direct way. Third, I think in terms of brand differentiation, trust, I suppose, is now the new currency. So in such times, in stress times, we do find that people revert to brand leaders. They revert to a more reliable or a more visible or a more familiar brand. And I think that is something which is a good news for leading brands, and maybe not such good news to the more lagging brand. Fourth, I think the biggest trend, and I've observed it from all angles in the last 4 months from a in auto industry point of view, is the huge trend towards digitalization. Now, digitalization was anyway a trend earlier. It was actually, if you look at the number of inquiries which we get on the web for our products, used to be about 3% in 2016. Today, 35% of our inquiries are digital on the digital platform. It's a huge trend, and I think this digitalization trend is not just in terms of purchase habits or actual buying process, but also in terms of media consumption. And we find that this is one of those categories of trends which are like going to be accelerated, which is already there, but it's got accelerated. And I think ID bucketed those trends which were already existing, which got accelerated because of the COVID. Some trends which are new and some which are. Finally, I would like to say the consumers are also now wanting brands to listen to them more closely and look at solutions or innovative solutions, not just in terms of product, but also in terms of virtual brand experience. And that's a challenge which we are currently addressing from an auto industry point of view. We are now getting into, in a big way, not just the digital platform for inquiries, for conversion, and so on, but also to give experience of the showroom itself to the consumer is immersive, and we have technology available now for that. I think these are the trends which I clearly observe in the post-COVID era. And as we say that it's not a restart that we are looking at now, it's a reboot, which means it's going to have a different operating system altogether now. And that's what we are looking. It's a very big challenge, of course, for marketers. In some way, of course, it's in society we have a lot of fear. We have some very unfortunate cases as well. But in terms of marketing, I think it's a unique situation where they need to be innovative to see these trends and take corrective measures.
Thank you. Thanks for interesting point.
So
And it is like
I just have I want to build. Sashank gave a very interesting thing that I thought I could build off. I think digitization, and I think a lot of folks think of digital as digital marketing. But I think, like Sashank very nicely put, how can digital transform your entire business? And I say, how can it, right from the processes that you run, from the way you manage your data, from the way you connect with your consumers, from the retail experience. I think can digital now become the spine for every business? And Sid talked about 3 businesses that will truly take off. But is this the time for every business to really start thinking about how can they build for the future of a digital spine? I was recently at a summit with a bunch of large CPG advertisers, and L'Oreal actually defined themselves as a beauty tech company. Now, it was very interesting that we are in the business of hair color and makeup and all of that, and what is this tech play? And they believe that they made a big acquisition globally of an app that can actually allow you to try on different sets of makeup. So you really don't have to walk into a store at all. You try all this on, you convert your transaction online, and you're done, right? So I think a lot of traditional businesses will also be thinking about opportunities to do this, just like Sashank is seeing that's happening for his business and in the industry. And it's interesting to think of digital as much more as an end-to-end solution versus just a front-end marketing solution.
Absolutely. Completely agree, Adi.
Yeah, so taking from there, basically, idea is to also look at what are the marketing pivots which is happening to sort of address some of these consumer changes, right? But before I go there, I just wanted to ask, as a sort of brand custodian or a sort of marketing professional, what gives you a sleepless night? Is there a sort of area which concerns more, 1 or 2 things? Because it's as Shashank has said, it's like a pressing a reset button, right? Somebody has pressed a reset button. There is a empirical learning which we all sort of followed for years or decades. It's not relevant, or many part of that rather not relevant.
Yeah.
Is there an area which you like to highlight?
Yeah. So while there are some industries, that definitely have a reset button, there are some industries which will have a tailwind effect, and there are some industries which will have a delayed recovery. And we broadly know, where which industry kind of falls in. But I think if I were to say what keeps me up at night as a business and a brand leader, I think the first thing is how to be even more relevant to consumers, and consumers who are undergoing a really bad time. And it's really human tragedy at a massive scale. And so therefore, first and foremost, as a responsible business, like I was saying, what's the role for the business to do to be powerfully relevant to consumers? So that's the first thing that keeps me up at night. The second thing is, how can I contribute to not only growing my business, but figure out the ways in which we can establish an ecosystem which is a larger ecosystem than just the individual corporate play. And we are kind of involved in that in various many ways, from setting up a seed fund to kind of accelerate the smaller game players in India, to the possibility of partnerships and alliances, because the world is changing and there is need for an ecosystem. And then at a deeply personal level, what keeps me up at night is, am I reskilling myself? Am I making sure that I understand the world? Some of the basics which are changing, some of the basics, of course, which will remain constant. So I guess those would be the three things that I would say. And to build on to Adi and Shashank's earlier point about digitization, I find something interesting happening, which I think is kind of material relevance to everybody who's tuned in. When we normally talk about digital, we use it as an umbrella. So we say above the line, matlab TV, press, radio, etc., print, and then we say there is digital. But I think what I have realized is that it might be useful to see digital and kind of break it down into a couple of segments. And the first segment is the traditional digital, as it were, where you are using digital media essentially for reach frequency, the same way that you would use possibly a television. Where you're using digital for impact, the same way that you would use possibly the front page of a newspaper. Yeah, so that's like traditional digital. The second part of it is interactive digital, which I think a lot of players are doing today. And I think in today's world where consumers are stressed, they are looking at, like Shashank was mentioning, brands who they trust. And they're also looking at people who they can talk to. So interactive digital comes into play here, where you have the possibility of chatbots, where you have the possibility of two-way communication, where you have the possibility of peer-to-peer discussion, that's kind of leading to social commerce or m-commerce as well. So that's the second part. And again, people who can get it right will be perhaps one step ahead in the digital journey. And then the third part of it, which is perhaps a little bit more evolving, but like we have seen, digitization can happen, can get accelerated by external circumstances. The third part of digital is immersive digital. Again, Shashank touched a little bit about it, that if in today's day and age, it might be difficult for consumers to walk into a showroom, how do you get them to experience the look and feel and the smell and the touch of a newly launched car model? And so on and so forth in many other industries as well, including the industry that I work in currently, which is gaming. How can you get more immersive? So whether it's VR, AR, or whether it is understanding how you can replicate with an avatar of yourself. So those are, I think, three interesting pieces that are happening, which might be relevant for marketeers to ponder about.
Very interesting. Any thought, Adi, Shashank, on this?
Well, I keep. I normally sleep well. Sid has a huge list. I think so. Sid probably is having many sleepless nights, I suppose.
I'm a late owl.
Okay, but the thing I keep worrying about, I think the whole marketing thing, we always used to talk about those P's and 4 P's and 5 P's and so on and so forth. It's changed completely, each of them. And I keep worrying that while I keep tracking each piece, but am I missing an alphabet altogether? So am I missing a, let's say, I for innovation, or do I miss a D for digitalization? Am I missing a T for technology, or am I missing S for new skills, as Sid said, or actually B for budget, which is also being rationalized? And then I say, oh, there's some things like vernacular, as Adi was suggesting. Many people are looking more localization and so on and so forth. So am I missing a complete set of alphabets altogether, which is maybe a Hindi Varnmala, ya Urdu ke harf? So am I missing complete thing altogether? And I think that's what keeps me thinking. Sometimes I get sleepless nights because of that. Otherwise, as I said, it's a great opportunity for marketers to reset and reskill themselves and and innovate and take care of what the environment has thrown up. Very unprecedented.
शशांक, आपके ए और डी और आई पे मैं दो एफ भी ऐड कर देता हूँ, full funnel, because that's another very interesting thing that's happening in times like these. I think again it's got accelerated by what we are witnessing this year, which is the need to and the evolving ability of brand builders, marketeers, business people to play across the funnel. What do I mean by that? We've often heard this, talk about, or the artificial distinction between performance marketing and brand marketing, and I'm sure Adi will build on this. But I do see that there is more and more for folks to figure out in circumstances like these how to play full funnel. So traditionally, my industry, my company, we've been very, very good, very efficient performance marketeers, but we are also opening up the brand world and we are going top funnel. So national advertising, etc., etc. Similarly, I would argue for a lot of businesses which have been very good in terms of the top funnel, which is awareness, brand building, etc., are going deeper down into mid funnel and lower funnel, lead gen, etc., including industries like yours, Shashank, in auto. So I think that's the other piece. And I believe that marketeers of today who don't know how to harness data or who don't know how to play the full funnel will increasingly find the need to reskill themselves and learn more.
Absolutely. Well said, Sid. Very well said. Very well said.
Interesting point, Sid. I'll come back to you, but before that, let me check with Adi if there's a point to add on earlier part.
So Tushar, I think about it in two steps. Once with the Google lens, right? First, it goes back to what the goal of the company is, right? How do we make the internet helpful for every Indian? I think the profile of consumers is changing dramatically. The products that we have, are they relevant to the next 500 million people who are going to come onto the internet? And to be able to build products that resonate with the new set of internet users, do we need to understand them better? Do we have a setup to understand them deeply? Do we have a product development mindset that can create products that will be relevant to them? And I think that's really going to be something that is the next wave in terms of what are the right set of products to build to this new set of users. As we talk to our advertising partners, I think there are 4 engines today at play. And I think of those 4, they've been covered in some sense. But from my view, there's the ads engine, there's the tech engine, there's the commerce engine, and the payments engine. I think true value gets unlocked when we are actually able to connect the dots across all the 4. I think everybody says there is a need to do it, but I think the secret sauce in being able to do it, and that is the real challenge, right? So I think that really keeps me awake, that do we have a simple enough model to be able to connect all of these 4 to be able to unlock true value for our advertising partners. So I think that to me is a challenge. From a marketer and generally from an industry point of view, I think how do we stay nimble, right? What has hit us has maybe taught us that things are going to change when least expected. And I think about the workforce, and workplace. All these 3 have changed. And are we building a skill to be ready to make the next jump when the next ball hits us? I think that's something that makes me think a lot about that.
Thanks, Adi. And coming back to Steve, your point, the brands are not built overnight. And in today's scenario, basically, and this is a question to you and Sid, how do we balance? Where do we balance? And you made a very interesting point on a full funnel. So, traditionally, we have been talking about brand versus performance, short term versus medium to long term, top of funnel, bottom of the funnel. How relevant all these terms, and where does brand marketer draw the line today?
Yeah. I can be a little provocative and say that in today's super digitally connected world, brands can actually get built over time, overnight. However, trust is earned over time, and trust is something that literally you have to work towards every day. Whatever trust you've earned kind of gets deposited, and then you have to again earn it back the next day. But from a point of view of brand awareness, brand trial, word of mouth, I think that has all got accelerated. So I think that's the first piece that I'd like all of us to remember. There are many gaming brands, both in global markets as well as in India, which people actually did not know about till a few months ago. And I think they've done a fantastic job at creating awareness and adoption. Now, of course, how much that lasts as we go along from a retention point of view, we will see. But I think it's super interesting that today you can literally, that whole IDA model of following awareness, interest, desire, action, it was a linear model. And as Addy and the Google team will always say that it's kind of got wrapped into a noodle where you can literally have brand discovery right to brand trial. And I've experienced that personally as well as a consumer, when I'm shopping online, where I'm experimenting continuously. My father, who's 72 years old, has discovered many brands for the first time in his life through online shopping. So I think the need is to my mind, and that's what we reflect back in our business actions, first to find out at this point of time what are the most important needs and need states of consumers. The second is to find out how can you make user journeys as rich and frictionless as possible, and balancing both, of course, is where the challenge is. And then the third is how do you continue to build trust in a world which is deeply stressed, because that's something that you have to kind of do every day. While digitization will help you, tools and technology will help you. So I think those would be my three perspectives in terms of building brands in today's hyper digital age. Eddie?
Sid, no, I'd say a very interesting point that you made. We've noticed that a lot of new products are entering the consumer's basket, right? Which may not typically have. So, for example, vacuum cleaners, right? Everybody's having cleaned their homes on their own. So suddenly that's casual wear. I don't. Tushar's wearing a jacket on this call, but I guess if we were all in the real world, we would have all been jacketed, right? But suddenly casual wear has made a huge, huge jump. Home entertainment systems. You can't go out. The best entertainment you can get is in the four walls of your home, and you want to invest behind quality entertainment. So I think there are opportunities opening up everywhere as these new products enter a consumer's consideration set, and to be able to be at the right time. Like what is good advertising? It's the right message at the right time to the right user, right? Everybody benefits. The consumer benefits and the brand benefits. And I think these are times to think about how we can think about this with the strong layer of trust that Shashank talked about, to make all advertising really relevant and useful to both parties.
Yep.
So we have started getting a sort of audience question, and I guess in the spirit of new normal, I'm going to weave in those questions in a flow. So we'll go with that. Shashank, this is a question for you. Has there been a change in the media mix? Do you see this trend to continue?
Yes, clearly there has been a change in the media mix. Media habits have changed quite a lot in the pandemic, post-pandemic. For example, television is up. In fact, the prime time has shifted. During the lockdown, the prime time was 11 to 11:30 rather than the evenings. 11 to 11:30 in the afternoon, in the mornings is what I'm talking about. We have OTT, which has gone up substantially. OH is down, and radio is down, probably because of the commuting time being lesser. But people like radios, some radio stations shifted to digital completely. Those have actually continued flourishing. So yes, there has been a change in the media mix as far as for us, digital is actually now the number one spend. It is almost like 35% of our spend. We spend substantial amounts, actually almost like 700 crores, 750 crores on marketing and advertising, and almost 35% of it now is in digital. And the good point is for digital that is that you can actually measure your ROI very accurately. You can actually do personalization, and these are something which is allowed by the new technology platforms. Is something which is going to continue in the future as well.
On this point, I just wanted to ask a question. How do we sort of identify what's a real trend and what's a transitionary trend within the marketing, right? So, there are multiple buzzwords which is keep coming in, especially on a digital side and overall marketing. So, what's your approach to identify a long-term bet versus like something which is transitory?
Is that?
I can kind of certainly offer a little bit of perspective from my personal experience. The first is nobody really has a crystal ball. So I mean, if they would have betted on the winners and gone all the way laughing to bank. But I think the best thing that possibly one can do is raise the number of listening signals that you have. Where are you drawing in? What are you listening to? So in the good old days when I was working in CPG, consumer goods, the value of focus groups going to consumers' homes, meeting them, accompanying them on a shopping mission in the local store, etc., used to be ways to get those signals, and that's still very, very relevant. How do you supplement that with digital means? How do you supplement that with reading what's happening in terms of consumers' other life choices? So treating consumers as people first and understanding what's going on in their minds. and how can you get all those signals in. Second is the ability to sift through what is the noise, like you said, what's a trend, and what is something that could be something sustainable to build long term. I think that's where judgment comes in. That's where the ability to create a good team comes in, a balanced, diverse team comes in. And I think, in my Vodafone years, I think that was something that I was deeply, deeply, humbled and kind of proud about, that we had an ecosystem of people who were helping us pull all this together and to sift through the noise and then to work on something which was valuable. And then the third part that I have found is useful is distilling this down and following almost like a spirit of experimentation, because not everything you will learn necessarily by saying the theory will only get you to some place. Then you will have to mount a series of small experiments, see what's working, what doesn't, cut it out, move to the next thing. So those would be quick 3 summary points from my side.
There's a next question which is coming on the brand safety, and I guess this seems to be more in the context of digital. So how brands are addressing the brand safety concerns, and what are your tips on that? Shashank, would you like to address? Or Shashank or Emily?
I didn't get that thing. Brand safety, you said?
Yeah, in a digital media environment specifically. So especially there is a sort of a concern around the fraudulent activity around brands.
Okay. Okay. So obviously, technology, you have to be good at technology. And so first of all, we need to find out what possibilities exist for such breaches of safety, and then plug them. And I think we have a huge number of examples that in such situations we have found the frauds increasing exponentially. And I think we now have counter technologies which one has to be very careful about, especially when we are, even for cars, for example, even offering financing and even offering payment platforms on the digital platform. So I think it's very important that we need to look at these to plug in those safety measures. And I can only imagine from a technology point of view. And also from analytics, you can actually find out some trends if there's something which is hurting the safety overall. And I would say that especially for automobile, for example, where we are now using digital platform across the entire funnel. We are using digital even in the top funnel now. So unlike the past when we were using at the lower end of the funnel, I think there is a big scope of trying to of using technology to plug in those safety gaps.
And one last question before we go to sort of closure, in terms of marketing accountability and sort of quick word on in terms of what has changed in terms of ROI focus or the marketing accountability as a function post-COVID era. Sid and Shashank and Adi, I'm just opening up to all three of you.
I'll just share on a lighter note. I met a colleague once a friend who said, "Hey, I've joined this new job and my card said head of marketing. But I walked into office and then later I met another guy who gave me his card and said head of performance marketing. Does that mean my marketing doesn't have to deliver any performance?" So I think, I think ROI is top of mind for everyone more than ever. And I think the topic earlier about full funnel, how can we leverage the full funnel is really the secret sauce that all of us need to think about.
Yeah, fully agree to that. In fact, I have often said this in the past, and I'll say it again. Marketers need to be super focused on ROI if they want a seat at the top table, and so that's been my fundamental driving belief. And if you want to be kind of central part of the organization driving senior level decision making, ROI becomes super important, of course, in these times, but also on all times. I think it's a timeless principle. That's fun. Second is, it's a marketing team which is super connected to consumer amidst all the other teams that exist in the organization. Therefore, greater responsibility to stay super connected, super humble, super relevant for the benefit of the organization and for the benefit of the teams that you work under. So I think the role of marketing as a central brain and heart of the organization is more important than ever.
Great, thank you, and very, very interesting conversation. I think what was the sort of key message and might sort of take out is there are multiple dimensional. It's a transformation change is happening at a marketing level, right? And as Shashank has rightly pointed out, it's a rebooting of many areas and sort of rethink which is required. We need to learn a new maybe ABCD of marketing and not just keep it limited to 4 Ps. So a bit widen the horizon, it's becoming a more cross-functional area. And areas which I guess what I hear from Sid is also very, Sid and Hadi is the entire full approach. It's not about above the below, it's a through the line, or how do we sort of think more holistically. It's becoming very, very important. Great, thanks for all your input, and it was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Tushar, sir. Thank you to the panelists for this enticing session. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank our partners and friends of Marcon supporters. Thank you to the audience for the lovely response you've given to this session. Please do also take out some time to visit our exhibitor space on the platform and check out their offerings. We will soon be joining again for another